Your cat's entire body is built to hide what he's feeling from you. His posture can look relaxed when he's actually in pain. His purr can mean contentment, or it can mean he's soothing himself through something much harder. But there's one part of him that almost never lies, because it's the one part he was never able to learn how to control: his eyes. And once you know how to actually read them, you'll realize your cat has been telling you the truth this entire time. You just didn't know where to look. Here's what I want you to picture, because I think almost everyone watching this has lived this exact moment. You're sitting with your cat, close enough to really see his face, doing that slow blink thing, just taking him in the way you do sometimes. And something about his eyes looks different. Not dramatically different. Not call the emergency vet different. Just enough that you can't quite place it, and you end up staring a little too long, trying to figure out what changed. Maybe you even blinked first, looked away, looked back, just to double check you weren't imagining it. If that's happened to you, this video is for that exact moment. I want to be upfront about something, because I hear a version of this all the time in the clinic. If it was a real problem, it would be obvious. Red, swollen, the eye shut. I understand why that feels true. It's the kind of problem you'd expect to see coming, the way a limp or a wound announces itself. But most of what actually matters in a cat's eyes shows up as something much quieter than that. A change in symmetry, a membrane you didn't even know existed suddenly becoming visible, a shift in how the pupil responds that has nothing to do with the room getting darker. None of that looks like an emergency. All of it can matter just as much as one, and the quiet ones are exactly the ones people miss for weeks. Before I walk you through what I actually look for, tell me in the comments, has your cat's face ever looked off to you in a way you couldn't explain? I want to know how common this actually is, because in my experience, it's a lot more common than people admit out loud. Most cat parents assume they're the only one who's stared at their cat's face, wondering if they're overthinking it. You're not. Here's an observation that took me a long time to say out loud, because it sounds almost too simple to be useful. If I could only examine one part of a cat's body, with no other information at all, I would pick the eyes every single time. Not the posture, not the tail, the eyes. Because everything else about a cat can be performed. In a way, a scared cat can still hold his body loosely, can still let you pet him, can still purr through something that's actually distressing him. Cats are exceptionally good at this. It's not deception in the way we'd think of it in a person. It's an instinct built over millions of years. The same hiding instinct we've talked about on this channel before. But the eyes are the one place where that performance breaks down, because the reactions happening there are largely involuntary. He's not choosing what his pupils do. He's not choosing what that third eyelid does, which means when you learn to read this correctly, you're reading something he genuinely can't control, no matter how much the rest of him is trying to seem fine. Let's start with pupil size, because this is the one people get wrong most often. Everyone knows pupils dilate in the dark and shrink in bright light. That part's obvious, and most people stop right there. What almost nobody connects is that pupils also dilate under stress, fear, and pain, completely independent of the lighting in the room. So if you notice your cat's pupils are wide open in a bright room, with no obvious visual reason for it, no toy, no sudden movement, nothing chasing his attention, that's not curiosity. That's very likely his nervous system telling you something is wrong, in a language that has nothing to do with vision at all. And here's the part that trips people up. A dilated pupil in a calm-looking cat is often dismissed exactly because the rest of him looks so at ease. That contradiction, calm body, alarmed eyes, is itself a signal worth paying attention to. Here's a story that stuck with me more than almost any other case I've seen. I once examined a cat who, by every normal measure, looked completely relaxed. Lying down, loose posture, even purring while I checked him over. If you'd walked in and looked at his body, you'd have said that cat was fine. And honestly, so would most vets on a quick glance. But his eyes told a different story entirely. Slightly too wide for the lighting. A faint asymmetry that hadn't been there at his last visit. That was the only place his body was actually being honest with me, and it turned out to matter a great deal. It was the detail that led to catching something his owner had no idea was happening. I think about that case every time someone tells me their cat seems totally normal. The second thing I want you to learn to notice is something most cat parents have genuinely never heard of: the third eyelid. Cats have an extra membrane tucked into the inner corner of each eye that you basically never see when a cat is healthy and relaxed. It stays retracted, out of sight, doing its job so quietly that most owners don't even know it's there. But when that membrane becomes visible, especially at rest, especially in both eyes at once, that's a real clinical sign vets take seriously. It's often not even about the eye itself. It's frequently connected to something happening elsewhere in the body. Pain, illness, general system-wide stress. Most owners have looked directly at this membrane 100 times without knowing it existed, let alone knowing that its sudden appearance is worth paying attention to. I've had owners tell me, once they finally noticed it, that they genuinely thought it was some kind of injury or growth, simply because nobody had ever explained that it's a completely normal structure, one that's only concerning when it decides to show itself. The third thing is symmetry, and this one requires something most people skip entirely: an actual baseline. Some cats naturally have one eye that looks slightly different from the other, a little more open, a slightly different pupil size, a subtle color variation, and for those cats, that's just normal, nothing to worry about, part of who they've always been. The problem is telling the difference between "that's just how he's always looked" and "that's new since last week," and you can only make that call if you've actually paid attention before today. This is exactly why I tell people to take a few photos of their cat's face when he's calm and clearly comfortable. Not because you need to become a photographer, but because memory alone isn't precise enough to catch a change that happens gradually. The same way you might not notice a friend's hair slowly getting longer if you see them every single day. Let's talk about color for a second, because this is where things get a little more serious, and I want to handle it carefully. The iris, the colored part of the eye, should generally stay a consistent shade over your cat's life. A new patch of darker color, a change in the overall hue of the eye, or a color shift that's only happening in one eye and not the other, is something worth getting checked rather than watched and waited on. I'm not telling you this to scare you into thinking every subtle variation is a crisis. Plenty of cats have small natural markings in their irises that have simply always been there. I'm telling you because this is exactly the kind of change that's easy to dismiss as "he's always had a spot there," when it's actually new, and new is the detail that matters most. Here's something I think is genuinely underappreciated. Your cat's eyes are also one of the earliest places certain systemic illnesses show up, sometimes before anything else in his body gives it away. Changes in the eye have been linked to conditions affecting blood pressure, kidney function, and more, which means paying attention here isn't just about eye health specifically. It's about catching something bigger, earlier, in the one place your cat's body can't quite hide it. This is part of why I keep coming back to the eyes in my own practice, even when an owner comes in worried about something that seems completely unrelated. This is exactly the kind of thing the Reading the Face of Pain chapter in my CE Method ebook walks you through, step by step. Not more things to memorize, just a real way to actually know instead of guess. If you've ever wished you could just tell what your cat is feeling instead of piecing it together from scattered clues, this is that. Check the first comment pinned at the top. That's where the link is. I want to give you something practical you can actually use this week, because information without a habit attached to it tends to just fade by tomorrow. Take 3 or 4 photos of your cat's face the next time he's genuinely relaxed, mid-nap, purring, completely at ease, ideally in similar lighting each time. Keep them somewhere easy to find, whether that's a folder on your phone or just your camera roll. That becomes your reference point. The next time something about his eyes catches your attention, you're not comparing against a vague memory that might be wrong. You're comparing against something real, and that difference alone will save you an enormous amount of unnecessary worry, and occasionally catch something worth acting on early, before it becomes the kind of problem that is obvious. I want to say this clearly, because I don't want anyone panicking after this video. Most of the time, a cat's eyes look exactly the way they should, and most subtle asymmetries are just how that particular cat has always looked. This isn't about treating every glance at your cat's face like a diagnostic exam, and it isn't about staring at him with new anxiety every time you sit down together. It's about knowing what actually counts as a signal, so the one time it matters, you're not the person who dismissed it as nothing, and you're not the person who panicked over something completely harmless either.
If this helped, you're already one of the cat parents who notice. That's what I call everyone who watches this channel, because you clearly are one. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and tell me in the comments what you want me to cover next.
Your cat was never a small dog, and his face was never as unreadable as it might have felt before this video. His eyes were never hiding the truth from you. You just hadn't been shown where to look. Now you have. This isn't a replacement for your vet. Think of me as the friend who tells you exactly what to ask them next time you're in that exam room. Take care of him. I'll see you in the next one.